Welcome back. Before the break, we showed you the status of the COVID relief bill that is stalled in Congress, and we also told you the consequences if lawmakers do not act, and we're talking within the end of next week. I want to bring in our guest now, a key player also in the Senate, Senator Ben Cardin, a Democrat from Maryland. He serves on both the Finance and the Foreign Relations committees. Senator, there's people watching tonight or looking at the calendar and saying, you know, the end of July, it's getting here pretty close. Are the checks going to stop coming? Is my protection for foreclosure, or if they're a renter, being put on the street, is that going to get done here before the end of July? Are you confident, or are you way apart from the Republican plan that you guys didn't even get to negotiate on?
Well, I must tell you, I'm as frustrated as the people you're talking to. We should have passed this several months ago. The House passed the HEROES bill 2 months ago. We are now at the deadline on protection for renters and homeowners for unemployment benefits. And it's clear to me we're going to have a gap, and we shouldn't have this gap. So we should have had a bill out well before now, but Leader McConnell is determined to have a partisan Republican bill put together, and he hasn't been able to do it as of yet. And we should have had it literally 2 months ago. We should have had this passed, signed into law well before now.
On the subject of COVID, and more specifically, whether or not the states and the health apparatuses are equipped to handle it, this is what the head of FEMA had to say regarding PPE shortages that a lot of hospitals are complaining about.
If there is a hospital out there that does not have PPE, contact their state emergency manager, contact their state health director, and we will get PPE to you.
Senator, he's basically saying all they got to do is ask and it's going to come. I've spoken to doctors, I've spoken to the nurses who don't have the gear, to hospital administrators saying in some of those hard-hit states, we're running really, really low and we're weeks from the peak of this. Where is the reality, and why hasn't the federal government, basically saying with the Defense Procurement Act, we're going to get the stuff, we're going to make the production of the tests or the labs or whatever we need here to get our act together?
Well, you're exactly right. Months ago that we had shortages, and we continue to have shortages in personal protective equipment, particularly as we start to reopen our society. And we should have used the Defense Production Act to make sure that we have a domestic supply of things such as masks and shields and the type of aprons that are necessary and gloves, and those type of issues should have been produced by the government in adequate numbers so that those schools that are opening up and know how many personnel are going to have to change protective equipment every day, they know they have a reliable supply. Or those that are on the front line in the nursing homes, our healthcare workers, know that they don't have to reuse protective equipment that is supposed to be used only for one occasion. So we have tremendous shortages today in need, and the federal government has not stepped up to make sure there's a reliable supply.
Can you explain to my audience, because I'll never forget the scene where the governor of Maryland, Governor Hogan, literally had the state cops waiting at the airport so that when the jet came in, he'd made sure he'd get it before the feds would take it first. Do we still have a lack of coordination between the feds and the states now towards the end of July here as we're still dealing with this pandemic, or have we at least figured out who's on first?
I think Governor Hogan would acknowledge that we do not have the type of coordination between the federal government and the state the way we should. The messaging has been very different coming out of Annapolis and that coming out of Washington, D.C. And I am very supportive of Governor Hogan's clear message to the people of Maryland as to what we needed to do and the steps he took in order to protect the people of our state. But he should have had a coordinated plan coming out of Washington to assist him in that, and we didn't have that. So it is very difficult for governors to work on a supply chain issue that effectively only can be handled from the federal government. It's very clear for a governor to counter a message coming out of the White House about the use of masks or about the importance of distancing when the message coming out of the White House is so much different than what the public health people are saying and you want for the people of your state.
We saw what's gone on in Portland, the promises that it'll happen in Chicago. What would your reaction be if all of a sudden, with no coordination with Baltimore, The president sends in federal troops, if you will, into the streets of Baltimore and starts rounding up protesters and throwing them in unmarked vans. Can he even do that? I mean, I saw on Fox News, of all places, a legal expert saying this is way beyond the pale constitutionally of where the president can go with troops on American soil in American cities.
Well, this is so far beyond what is the principles of a democratic state and our own Constitution. The president clearly is violating the Constitution when he sends undisclosed troops into a state without proper markings in order to carry out his political agenda, not to deal with the safety issues at the request of a state. So this is very much against the traditions of our country, the Constitution of our country, and the principles of democracy. He's trying to stifle peaceful demonstrators or people who disagree with his views, or to send a political message that he's tough on law and order. So for all those reasons, there's no justification to violate the Constitution of the United States the way he is.
I mentioned before, Senator, you're on financial services, and one of the things, thankfully, we haven't had to worry about is the Federal Reserve, which I think has acted pretty responsibly during this financial crisis and decisively. But you guys are going to have to decide if a woman by the name of Judy Shelton should join the Fed. And without getting into the weeds on this, she doesn't even believe we should have a Federal Reserve. She's talking about things like the gold standard, et cetera. Is there really enough Republican support that she could get pushed through? I haven't found one economist who says she's right for the job.
Well, you're right here. I hearing money that took place in the banking committee, there was clear disagreement among Democrats and Republicans that this nominee had the qualifications to be on the board. We were disappointed it came out of the committee. It just shows the influence the President of the United States has on the Republican senators. I would hope that they would exercise the independence that's critically important on the Senate confirmation and recognize that the Fed plays a critical role. It's an independent role, but it's part of our mission to properly control our economy. They have done a really first-rate job during this pandemic, and it's in our economic interest to make sure that we preserve the Federal Reserve, and this nominee is not the person who should be on the board.
And finally, Senator, we mentioned the governor of Maryland, Governor Hogan, who has spoken publicly against the president, even though they share the same party. A couple of your colleagues in the Senate, Mitt Romney notably, has broken ranks with the president from time to time, including the impeachment vote. Listen, usually I think people are wearing tinfoil hats when they think, the president won't accept the results of the election, but I'm starting to think they might be right. Take us behind the curtain in the cloakroom. You don't have to name names. Should we feel confident that if the president decides, I'll call the election invalid, I won't respect the vote, I won't do X, Y, and Z, that enough Republicans will stand with you to say that's a bridge too far?
I think the American people will say that's a bridge too far, and the election results will hold, and the American public will demand that we carry out our constitutional responsibilities. At that point, I think and I hope that my colleagues will recognize that this deals with the fundamentals of America, the transition of power, the free and fair elections, and to do it in an orderly way. So my hope is that the President of the United States and Joe Biden both will abide by the results of a free and fair election, and we won't have to cross that bridge. If we do, I would hope that we would all join together in Congress to say clearly the Constitution is going to be carried out.
Well, we sure hope you're right. Senator, I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Up next, all things COVID, including some scary new projections about coronavirus, especially about what we could be seeing this fall when flu season starts and schools could be reopening. An ER doctor in New York City will join us to discuss what we could be in for.